The courtroom was thick with tension. Every seat in the room was filled with a heavy silence. Not even the bailiff or the stenographer dared to make eye contact. A local journalist huddled quietly in a corner, scribbling notes. At the center of it all stood Pam Bondi, clad in a familiar navy blazer, a symbol of the authority she once wielded with pride. When her name was finally called, Pam moved with deliberate calm. The judge, a man known simply as Judge Corbin, spoke in a measured tone. "This court finds you in contempt for knowingly violating a direct gag order. You are hereby fined $50,000 to be paid in full within 30 days. Pam met his gaze without flinching. "Understood," she replied quietly. Then, almost as if to punctuate the moment, she reached into her briefcase and produced a worn manila folder marked with 3 red tabs. Everyone in that room instantly recognized the gravity of what the folder might contain. Rumors had circulated after her recent radio interview, whispers of a judge who had silenced whistleblowers, allegations of documents disappearing under mysterious circumstances, and hints at backroom deals that manipulated evidence. Pam had never explicitly named names, but the implications were unmistakable. Now, with that folder in hand, she was about to upend the carefully constructed narrative. The judge's eyes flickered in surprise. "Ms. Bondi, do you have something you wish to submit to the court?" "I do," she said evenly, "but only if you are prepared to hear the full context." Her voice was calm yet firm as she began to open the folder with an air of reverence. The first document was an email dated 6 months earlier, a terse exchange between a junior clerk and a private attorney, bearing the simple subject line, "Client request denied." Its impersonal tone belied the storm of implications hidden beneath its sterile language. Next, she produced a deposition from a court interpreter, a person who had been abruptly dismissed after questioning why sealed testimony had vanished. Finally, she presented a notarized affidavit from a former assistant to Judge Corbin, detailing instructions to withhold crucial evidence in a civil lawsuit involving a local hospital. With each document laid before the court, it became clear the evidence was not a random collection, but a calculated effort to conceal the truth. "I never broke the gag order," Pam declared slowly, her eyes never leaving the judge's, "because I never discussed the case directly. I merely recounted what I witnessed, and what I continue to witness, behind closed doors. The public deserves to know when the law is being twisted to serve those in power." For a long moment, the courtroom held its breath. Judge Corbin's expression remained inscrutable as the seconds ticked by, each tick echoing around the hushed space. Then his voice, though still measured, hinted at uncertainty. "You may proceed," he said. Pam's mind flashed back to a quiet morning months earlier, when her life had seemed far removed from such confrontations. She had been sipping coffee on her back porch at Clearwater Beach, enjoying a sunrise that promised a day of quiet reflection rather than public battle. In those peaceful moments, she had imagined a semi-retired life filled with occasional consulting and public speaking, never this kind of high-stakes drama. But fate had other plans. That same morning, an urgent call from Leah Holcomb, a longtime friend from her early days in the state attorney's office, had shattered the calm. "Pam, I need you to listen," Leah had said in a strained whisper. In less than a minute, Leah had left a voicemail containing a fragment of a conversation. 2 voices arguing urgently over a sealed court document. One voice, calm yet ominous, belonged to a man. The other, trembling with fear, to a woman who insisted, "I told you." Pam had replayed the voicemail several times until every nuance was etched into her memory. The next day, she had driven 2 hours inland to meet Leah in the dim light of a small-town kitchen, where the atmosphere was heavy with secrets. Phones were turned off, the blinds drawn, and in that silence, Leah had pressed a collection of printouts and hastily scribbled notes into her hands. The documents prominently featured the name Jonas McNeil, a nurse who had filed a lawsuit against a local hospital over severe patient negligence. But the version of the case available to the public was not the original complaint. Critical allegations had been erased. As Leah hesitated before uttering the next name, Corbin, Pam felt a chill recalling the judge's reputation for decisiveness and his network of powerful connections that ran deep. Sitting there in the muted kitchen light, Pam understood that this was not an isolated incident. It wasn't a mere administrative error. It was a deliberate cover-up. Later, an old mentor had called, his voice low and grave. "Pam, I know what you're doing," he warned, "but know that Corbin doesn't lose. He plays a long game. If you keep pressing, it won't just be your career that suffers." But by then, Pam had already decided that silence was complicity. She would not be cowed by those who manipulated the truth. Back in the courtroom, as Judge Corbin absorbed the evidence, Pam continued her measured exposition. "I have documented not one, but several incidents where evidence was mishandled. In addition to the email and deposition, there is a sworn affidavit from Denise Kramer, a former court assistant from Judge Corbin's office, who alleges that orders were given to withhold a critical deposition transcript. There is also documentation outlining the discrepancies in the official complaint of the McNeil case versus what was originally filed. And lastly, I have a notarized statement from a retired bailiff who witnessed unauthorized interactions between Judge Corbin and outside counsel during recesses." Her words rang clear in the hushed courtroom. The judge's gaze shifted back and forth between Pam and the growing stack of evidence. After a long silence, he finally said, "Ms. Bondi, what exactly is your motion here?" Taking a deep breath, she replied, "I am requesting an immediate review of the McNeil case by an independent judicial panel. I further request that my contempt fine be stayed until that review is complete. If this motion is denied, I am fully prepared to take the matter to federal court. I stand here today because I refuse to allow the systematic suppression of truth to continue unchecked." A murmur rippled through the audience. Judge Corbin leaned back, interlacing his fingers as he contemplated her words. With a final nod, he instructed his clerk, "File the motion. I will review it and provide a written response within 7 business days." Pam's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said, before resuming her seat. After the hearing, as the courtroom began to empty, whispers and furtive glances filled the space. A young reporter approached Pam, eyes wide with curiosity. "Ms. Bondi, is it true that you have secured a sworn statement from someone in the judge's chambers?" Without missing a beat, Pam looked the reporter squarely in the eye. "It is real," she stated simply. "That's all I have to say for now." The reporter scurried away, his notepad clutched tight, as if his life depended on every word. Outside, in the drizzle that accompanied a gloomy Florida morning, Pam stood alone for a moment. There was no triumph in her posture, only a clear resolve. That day, she had not just defended herself against a fine, she had challenged a system built on secrets and selective. In the days that followed, instead of awaiting Judge Corbin's written reply, Pam took the initiative. She granted an interview to a reporter from the Tampa Bay Times. The interview was measured at first, careful, factual, but it quickly escalated when the reporter asked, "Are you afraid of retaliation?" Without hesitation, she replied, "I've already paid the price for speaking out. Now it's a matter of proving the truth no matter the cost." That single statement sent ripples beyond the courtroom. News outlets picked up the story, legal blogs debated the implications, and a retired judge on Twitter suggested, "If even half of these allegations are true, urgent review is needed." Meanwhile, a prominent podcast host reached out for an interview. Pam's defiance had transformed her from a lone voice in Tampa into a spark that was beginning to catch fire. Soon after, an anonymous email arrived from a former staff member of the clerk's office. Attached to the email was a scanned, redacted court memo bearing the initials RC for Roger Corbin. Pam read the memo repeatedly, each pass deepening her conviction that this battle was not against a single man, but a system built to suppress inconvenient truths. Calls kept coming. a legal intern dismissed for questioning duplicate file entries, a court stenographer recounting how transcripts were inexplicably returned for edits, and a paralegal who had been forced into silence after being asked to refrain from public commentary. Every message was another piece of evidence in a puzzle that threatened to reveal the depths of the corruption. Then, on the 11th day after the hearing, a courier delivered Judge Corbin's formal response. It was terse, a single sentence. Motion for review denied. Contempt fine upheld. The document bore only one signature: Roger C. Corbin. Pam reread those words again and again, each time feeling the weight of a carefully orchestrated decision designed to intimidate, rather than determined not to be cowed. That evening, Pam held a press conference outside the courthouse. In a modest gathering of only about 30 people, local activists, sympathetic legal professionals, and a handful of independent reporters, she recited her evidence once more. I have submitted sworn affidavits, documented inconsistencies in the McNeil case, and revealed a network of misconduct that extends far beyond one judge, she declared in a tone that balanced calm authority with measured defiance. This is not a personal vendetta. It is a stand for the principle that our courts must serve the truth, not shield their own interests. Her carefully chosen words resonated. Though the crowd was small, the message was clear. The fight for transparency had only just begun. The story ignited interest across the state. Within days, the Florida Judicial Qualifications Commission announced that it would launch an internal review of Judge Corbin's recent case history. The announcement was brief and lacked details, but it sent a powerful signal. Even the most entrenched systems could be forced to confront the truth. In the quiet days that followed, Pam's life began to change, subtly but indelibly. No longer did she receive the steady stream of speaking invitations or consulting offers that once flowed to her. Instead, her inbox had grown strangely silent. A law school in St. Petersburg postponed its scheduled speaking engagement, and a legal panel quietly removed her name from promotional materials. Even her longtime accountant reached out with a warning. Pam, you're shaking trees that some people would prefer left undisturbed. But Pam's response was measured, her resolve unyielding. If I let this go, I would be complicit, she said softly to herself, knowing that the cost of silence was far greater than the price of speaking out. Pam's dedication to uncovering the truth soon took her back to the details of the case. Weeks before the courtroom showdown, she had met with Jonas McNeil, a nurse whose case had been mysteriously altered, in the back room of a small diner in Bradenton. Jonas's eyes carried the sorrow and resignation of a man who had long since lost hope in the system. Over lukewarm coffee, Jonas whispered, "They told me to be grateful for what I got. I signed all that paperwork in exchange for silence." His voice cracked as he recalled the tragedy of a 15-year-old patient named Elijah, who had died after a seizure in the emergency room went unaddressed. "They said it wasn't my fight," Jonas murmured bitterly. But this was the fight for justice. When asked if he still had a copy of the original complaint, Jonas hesitated before pulling out a crumpled piece of paper, a document that detailed everything the official filing had omitted. For Pam, this was the crucial piece of evidence that confirmed her suspicions. The McNeil case was just one example in a series of incidents that pointed to a deliberate cover-up. Late one rainy night at home, Pam pored over the growing pile of documents on her kitchen table. Between the emails, affidavits, depositions, and internal memos, one detail stood out. An unsigned internal memo dated the day before Jonas's filing. Written in cold, bureaucratic language, it referenced an early suppression strategy for an impending settlement. Its tone was unmistakable. It was a blueprint to bury damaging evidence before it could reach the public record. With her heart pounding, Pam realized that Judge Corbin was not merely a passive adjudicator. He was deeply implicated, part of a larger network designed to protect powerful. Determined, Pam had gathered evidence from every available source. The same judges, attorneys, and clerks appeared in a pattern across several cases. Each instance of tampered evidence, each sealed file, told a story of systematic corruption. Anonymous tips arrived from former clerks and intern staffers who had long kept their silence out of fear. Some had even described secret meetings in cramped offices. A retired bailiff recalled witnessing the judge step away with a group of hospital lawyers during a recess, his actions suggestive of collusion rather than impartiality. As the days passed and the written response upheld Judge Corbin's decision, Pam's resolve only grew stronger. That night, under the weak glow of a desk lamp, she drafted her next move. A comprehensive exposé that would bring together every piece of evidence, every testimony, and every anonymous tip into a dossier that could not be easily dismissed. In her small, cluttered kitchen, she worked tirelessly, the sound of the rain outside mirroring the relentless storm of truth she was determined to unleash. And so, on a brisk morning several weeks later, with clouds heavy as lead and drizzles tapping the courthouse steps, Pam returned once again. This time, she entered the courtroom prepared not only to defend herself, but also to challenge the entire system. In a modest gathering of curious onlookers and determined on-the-scene reporters, she once again set her case before the bench. "Your Honor," she began, her voice resolute, "I am not here simply to contest a contempt fine. I am here to challenge the narrative of selective justice that seeks to silence anyone who dares to speak the truth. Enclosed in this folder are sworn affidavits from insiders, documented discrepancies in the official record, and first-hand testimonies from those who risked everything to bring the truth to light." When Judge Corbin asked, "Ms. Bondi, do you have legal representation?" she replied, "No, Your Honor. I represent myself today, and if necessary, I will take this matter to federal court." The room fell into a heavy silence, every eye in the courtroom fixed on her. After a few moments of deliberate stillness, the judge instructed the clerk, "File the motion. I will issue a written response within 7 business days." The mere announcement was a tactical delay, a move to keep the pressure off the underlying truth. Yet Pam's determination was undeterred. After the session, as she gathered her things, a young reporter caught up with her. "Ms. Bondi, is it true that you have secured testimony from within the judge's chambers?" he asked hesitantly. Meeting the reporter's eyes with a calm intensity, she answered, "It is real, and it is part of the record." The exchange was brief, but its implications echoed far beyond that one moment. Outside the courthouse, the world was awash in the soft drizzle of a typical Florida day. Pam's footsteps, measured and resolute, carried her away from the building and into an uncertain future where every step was both a risk and a statement. With each raindrop that fell around her, she seemed to embody the defiant truth that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, one voice, one determined voice, could force the light of accountability through even the darkest corridors of power. Over the next several days, public attention to the case grew. Pam granted her first press interview following the ruling. The interviewer, seated across from her at a local cafe, inquired, "Are you concerned about what might happen next? About retaliation?" Pam's response was measured, her eyes resolute. "I have already borne the brunt of suppression. The only thing left is for the truth to either be acknowledged or for everyone to see how high the stakes truly are," she stated clearly. Her words resonated across news channels, legal blogs, and social media. A retired judge from California tweeted that, "If even half of these allegations are true, an urgent judicial review is in order." Soon, a podcast host from a major city requested an interview. Yet, amid the storm of media attention, whispers from behind closed doors began to surface. An anonymous email arrived from a former clerk, accompanied by a scanned memo with redactions and the initials RC, a reference to Roger Corbin. Pam studied the document repeatedly, each reading confirming what she had feared, that the judiciary had become an echo chamber for powerful interests. More calls followed, one from a legal intern who had been dismissed for questioning file discrepancies, another from a court stenographer who recalled how transcripts were mysteriously returned for edits despite being accurate, and even one from a paralegal who had been pressured to stay quiet. Each piece was a thread in the tapestry of corruption she was unraveling. On the 11th day, a courier arrived with the court's formal written response. With trembling hands, Pam unfolded the paper and read its stark message. Motion for review denied. Contempt fine upheld. The only signature beneath was that of Roger C. Corbin. Though the message was brief, its weight was immense. The silence of that ruling spoke volumes, and Pam found herself not defeated, but further invigorated by its implications. That evening, amid the soft hum of a dimly lit room, Pam held a press conference outside the courthouse. A small but determined crowd had gathered, local activists, legal reformers, and a few supportive journalists. Standing behind a modest podium, she presented her evidence once more, her voice steady and resolute. I have submitted sworn affidavits, highlighted discrepancies in official records, and documented a pattern of systematic. My case is not an isolated incident. It is indicative of a system that values power over truth. I am appealing this decision in federal court, and I urge anyone who has been affected by similar practices to come forward. Her words, measured and sincere, stirred a quiet but potent energy among those listening. While no immediate victory was proclaimed that night, the ripples of her determination were already being felt throughout the community. In the days that followed, an unexpected shift began to take shape. The Florida Judicial Qualifications Commission announced an internal review of Judge Corbin's recent case history, an announcement that, although vague, was a significant crack in the facade of impunity. For Pam, reading that announcement felt like a validation of her relentless pursuit of the truth. It was an acknowledgement that even a tightly controlled system might be forced to examine its own integrity. Even as the media cycle soon shifted its focus to other stories, Pam's resolve remained unshaken. In quiet moments, as she walked alone along the beaches of Clearwater, the sound of the rolling waves served as a reminder that the truth, no matter how quietly spoken, always has a way of emerging. One early morning, as her feet sank into the cool sand and the ocean breeze filled her lungs with determination, her phone rang. It was Leah Holcomb once more. "Pam, did you see the update?" Leah asked, her voice filled with cautious hope. "They're now forming an independent panel, members from outside the state, to review the McNeil case and other associated cases." Pam paused, looking out over the vast expanse of the sea. "That's exactly what is needed," she responded softly. "If I had allowed this fine to silence me, I would have signaled that I was complicit. But I cannot, and will not, let the corruption continue unchecked." In the midst of her battle, more anonymous messages arrived. One day, an envelope bearing only her name in careful cursive appeared on her doorstep. Inside was a succinct note. "I was one of the jurors in the McNeil case. We never saw the real file. Thank you for not letting it slide." For Pam, those few words carried a profound significance, a quiet acknowledgement from someone inside the system, reaffirming that her struggle was not in vain. Late nights saw her poring over every document, every piece of evidence she had amassed. Between phone calls with former clerks and whispered tips from insiders, she began to construct a comprehensive narrative, a dossier detailing the entire pattern of tampering and suppression across multiple cases. It was not a triumphant success, nor a neatly concluded victory. It was the raw, ongoing fight for accountability. But in those painstakingly documented pages, she found solace. In the quiet after the storm of court sessions and press conferences, as she sat in a modest chair near her kitchen window watching the rain, Pam recalled words she once had shared with a young law student. Your reputation is not defined by how many cases you win, but by the truth you have the courage to speak. That philosophy had sustained her now more than ever. Despite the isolation, the professional setbacks, the hushed threats, and the ever-looming possibility of retaliation, Pam pressed forward. Her case, and the associated network of testimonies, began to spark deeper conversations among legal professionals, investigative journalists, and community leaders. In small round-table meetings and behind closed-door gatherings, former court staffers and reform-minded attorneys began to connect the dots. The same names, the same inconsistencies, the same pattern of selective silence that all pointed to a calculated effort to shield the powerful at the... Through it all, Pam remained steadfast. Even as the internal review by the Florida Judicial Qualifications Commission progressed slowly, and while the public's attention wandered to the next big headline, she knew that the battle for truth was far from over. Every day she carefully updated her digital archive, a secure forum where those who had suffered under the system could anonymously share their stories. This archive was not merely a repository of grievances. It was a living document of accountability, a tool meant to keep the fire of transparency burning, even if it flickered in the public eye for only a moment. One drizzly afternoon, as she sat watching the subdued gray sky from her small office in Clearwater, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from someone identifying themselves only as a friend. The text read, "We are many, and we are watching. Continue the fight." The words, brief as they were, resonated deeply with Pam. It was a reminder that despite the isolation and the seemingly overwhelming power of those who thrived in silence, there were still countless others, former jurors, intern staffers, and even current employees, ready to risk everything for truth. In that quiet moment, Pam felt a renewed strength. She thought back to the long road she had traveled, from her days of commanding courtrooms to the moment she stood defiant before the judge, from the hushed phone calls on quiet mornings to the outpouring of evidence on her cluttered kitchen table. Every step had led her to this point, where silence was no longer an option and where the cost of truth was measured not just in fines or career setbacks, but in the very soul of the justice system. And so, despite the official ruling and the muted response from those in power, Pam Bondi pressed on, resolute, determined, and driven by an unyielding commitment to speak the truth. In her words, in her actions, and in the quiet rebellion of every document and every anonymous note, she embodied a simple, powerful truth, that even when the system seems impenetrable, one brave voice has the potential to open cracks in the wall of silence, ushering in... The battle for justice was far from neatly resolved. It was an ongoing campaign, a fight that extended beyond courtrooms and press conferences, into the hearts and minds of those who believed in transparency and truth. And in that struggle, every quiet act of defiance, every carefully preserved piece of evidence, was a testament to the belief that silence, however imposed, is not the answer. As dusk settled over Clearwater, Pam sat on her back porch once more, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sky met the sea, a constant reminder of both the vastness of the world and the singular importance of standing up for what is right. In that reflective silence, she resolved once again that she would not be cowed, that no matter how many obstacles were thrown in her path, the truth would continue to be spoken. For in the end, it was not merely a fight for personal vindication, but a crusade to ensure that every citizen had the right to see the truth, a truth that, once unleashed, could not be contained. And so, as the rain softly subsided and the first hints of a new day glimmered on the horizon, Pam Bondi took a deep breath and prepared for the next step in her relentless pursuit of justice. Her journey was far from over. The system might have tried to silence her, but Pam's voice, backed by unwavering truth and the support of countless anonymous allies, would echo long after the courtroom doors closed. In that echo, hope was born. A hope that someday, every suppressed account, every hidden file, and every unspoken story would be brought to light. A hope that the battle for accountability would not end in resignation, but in a hard-fought triumph for all those who dare to speak out. And with that hope firmly in her heart, Pam Bondi stepped forward into the uncertain future, her resolve as unyielding as the ocean's tide, determined to ensure that truth would always find a